Glenn and Alan and Andy and Ben. We got a preview here from Glenn Rathke and on his upcoming training for WebDev. So let's see. Is that clear?
That's clear.
It's all yours, Glenn. I mean, Alan. I mean, Glenn. I mean, Andy.
I'll take it from there.
This too early for him.
This training is going to be pretty much on top of or in addition to the training that most of you are familiar with, and if you're not, you can go to sdcdev.net and check out our WINDEV training. You can actually see each of the modules there if you log in as guest. You can see each of the modules for about 2 minutes to give yourself an overview of what's happening. So we've taken that course and actually all those examples, and or most of them, and we're having corresponding examples in WebDev, and probably or may have some few surprises in there. So what I want to do is just a brief overview of some of the examples that we have. And the nice thing is, since they are almost exact from our WinDev class, is our manual in the beginning will actually complement this training until later when we create a different manual and maybe even some streaming videos. But the first portion here is all the examples. So what we'll do is in the training we'll go through the environment like we do in WinDev and talk about the different functionality from the menus. But what I want to do though is highlight some of the examples today. We will start from very simple basic example for those who have not done anything with WinDev. We will talk about doing data access as simple as a table browse, where you actually create a table, have it connect to your data, and you display it there. Nothing fancy about this, and as you can see on the screen, as we talk about that, the tables, we actually talk about how we change editable by default to selection with edit, how we can change the content and stored items for the table, how we talk about row display for creating calculated fields, how we can pass parameters. So we actually go from something simple to a little more complex, all the while touching on other topics. We then actually go, as we're building more complex, we will then go from a table control, and it's the same table control, but now we lay on top of it an H filter where we will actually do a small query by example. And so if we had one field for querying on, it's very simple, but if we have 10 fields, we'd add those here and do our little code. And so just to show how it works is we will search for the name, and we will then return just those records back. And in our class, we go through where it's advantageous to put that code, how we code the QBE, and then how we initialize the table. We also move into updating records and how we would actually call the update form, how we actually do the validation with the OK and the cancel. We talk about browser validation, as in this button over here. We talk about server validation because there's actually two distinct programs running. One of them happens to be your browser code. The other one happens to be your server code, and they all get melded together within your application. So we talk about how those two interact together. And as we do that, we also talk about further on that form of how we have a tab order and how we can move controls, how we group controls. As you see, when I select the groups button, the two buttons on the right disappear, and that's actually one line of code to do both buttons. So we talk about those kinds of groups. We also take the example now and we go from an H filter. In fact, let me grab that, and let's take it and make it extended. So now instead of having an H filter on a table, we actually show you how to create a query with parameters and how we pass parameters to the query. And so again, let's make the very simple example, and we'll say we'll do an R, but this time we'll do a starts with. Okay, so there's all the records that start with an R, or let's do all the records that contain a value. Okay, so we have those here, and we can also do our order by on the right side here, last name or occupation. So then, again, we'll go through and show you where you would put that code to fill the parameters for the query, and then how you would actually activate that to run. So as you can see, our training examples, as I had said, go from simple, the very basic, to a table, up to a query. We also talk about how you can fill a table by programming. And once you have it by programming, how we can also lay the QBE on top of that. We also talk about a query by example. So instead of having to create a QBE for every single browse that you want to do and all the code that you would have to write, we've actually implemented a query by example, which is the same table, but now what we've done is we've laid on top of that another window where we can actually build our selection criteria. And so we'll keep it simple again. So we'll find it where the last name is equal to Rathke and the first name is equal to Glenn. And we should just get back one record on that. But as you see, you can build complex statements. And you'll also notice that in the column on the left-hand side, those are all the columns that we have in our table. And with one line of code pretty much to call it, and maybe 4 or 5 lines to set variables up, you can do that for every single browse that you have. And so let's run that, and there's our record that comes back. So this becomes highly reusable in your web applications, just like we have in our WINDEV applications. And so when you take the class and you purchase the material, you walk away with all the examples, source code and manual and such, but you have these examples that you can use in any of your applications, and they're royalty free. And we also talk about printing. Let's move over to that. We show you how to do a report and how to create it as HTML for a single record that's highlighted in the table, or all of them, or how you can do PDFs, same thing, or how you can do RTF. So for right now, let's just select a, well, we'll print all, and we'll make it HTML. And so there's the report that comes back. So we talk about simple reports, we talk about implementing reports, and we talk about a report wizard within the design of how you can create and get going with your reports. We also can do it with RTF, so let's do that. So let's open, and so it will launch Word for us, and there is your RTF report created. Let's close that. And moving on to, we talk about loopers, and we'll handle them in a couple different ways here. One, we have our looper that would actually show the record here, and we can actually have multiples, and we can edit them. Or we can, in fact, let me do this because I ran that query and I selected one record. What I'd like to do is we will we'll stop that right now, and let me rerun that. Okay, let's go back over to loopers. And go to program. I keep missing that menu. Okay, and so here's the looper that we've got. And what we do is, one thing that we found in teaching the loopers, and we'd actually worked through this past week, is by default, and the way that PCSoft has their checkboxes working, after the first time, it takes 2 checks, or 2 ticks, to make a checkbox. So here's one click, here's another click. And here's one click, and here's another click. So it takes 2 to make it work, and users probably won't understand or like that. And so we came up with a workaround, and it's really simple, but we teach that in our class, because now we can just go and we can unclick them as fast as we want, or click or unclick. Oh, yeah. So we talk about loopers in that way, and we also talk about loopers on a. You have to excuse me for that because my mouse is moving off the pad. Browsed file. Okay, and so now what we've done, and I've actually implemented this in one of my applications, and this is a questionnaire that you can create. And I actually have an admin portion where you actually keep on adding to your looper and you add questions, and then this is the end result that users would see, and they can take a questionnaire. Works well on an iPad, and it's just a nice way of representing data. We also then, let's see, actually build browse table is the next subject on the right hand side, but unfortunately WebDev does not offer a build browse table function like we have in WINDEV, but we have a pretty slick workaround for that that makes it nice and simple to kind of create tables on the fly also, and we teach that in the class. We talk about SQL specific and we talk about QBE. And if you're wanting to see some more of this, because time's limited for us now, you can go and take a look at the excerpts that I mentioned at the top of at sdcdev.net. The last thing that I wanted to show today, because it's just like I've fallen in love with business rules, the way that we get them implemented here. PCSoft developed business rules, but their business rules pretty much are a repository that say anytime you're working with this form or these controls, this is what you need to be aware of. It has nothing to do with the code and has nothing to do with validation of your data. So what I've come up with is, let's go down. I've created business rules for you people table, and here's the business rule. Okay, and let's actually create a new one. We will select the table people, and we will do first name, and I will make it required. We'll move that across. So there's the code that it's generated, and it will have a visual clue of a blue background. So we'll say okay. Just leave it there. Yep, and I do have to give it a module name. Yep, we're going to work with you people table. Say okay. So now, if we actually go over to our data access and we select a record, when we come in here, you will notice now that these two fields are required. Now, the cool thing about this is to have this implemented on any of your maintenance forms, it takes one line of code. And the other thing that's really nice is, yes, this is the visual indicator, but what we want to do is also be able to validate that according to the rule that we did. So if we now say OK, it'll come back and it'll show all these two fields. So if you have 2 fields or you have 10 fields or whatever your business rules happen to be, it will come back and build you one message that says either this field is required or these 2 fields have to be greater than a 3rd field or whatever your rule happens to be. So to implement that validation on the save button is, I say one line of code, but it's 3 because we put it in an if statement. But it's highly reusable. You get to keep those 2 forms that have to do with business rules. One's a browse, one's an update, and then you have the modules that you use, and you put in 2 lines of code pretty much, and you've got a visual clue, and you've got your business rule being validated when you go to save the record. So these are the kinds of things that we cover in the class. Certainly not limited to this, because we, as in our WinDev class, we will also have how to do things. And we respond actually to people requesting new features in there. We talk about, we heavily discuss data access, and that's just in table form, in H filters, in queries, in stored procedures, in SQL statements, in H filters. So almost no matter which way you can retrieve data, we will have examples that show you how to do that and how to easily implement that. We talk about other syntax. We talk about string slicing. We talk about arrays. We have a good example on associative arrays. And we also talk about dynamic compilation, where you can dynamically compile something, and indirection. And in fact, our business rules is heavily relies on indirection, and also heavily relies on compiling, because we will dynamically compile a business rule at runtime and execute that. So at a high level, this is the WebDev training that we're offering, and it really mirrors almost example by example, at least at the major ones, what we're doing in WinDev.
Nice.
So,
Very nice.
Anybody got any questions?
Raise your hand or type in the chat, please. Or the guys with mics, you can ask. Yeah. So is this, what training is being offered? Do you have streaming? Do you have a class in St. Louis? Is this just the material? What do you have coming?
Well, what we offer is just the manual and the examples for WinDev, and you don't have to purchase streaming. But you can purchase the streaming on top of that as a package. So not only does the manual and the examples work together well, because the manual is based on the examples pretty much. The streaming then is also really tied closely to that. So as you look at one topic or as you move through the examples, you will see the exact same things in the streaming. And there's some interaction between Arnold and myself. He asks questions, and just have a good time discussing and going through those examples. The web dev portion at this point will be the examples. So what you'd really need is the manual that we have from the WinDev training, and in the beginning we'll probably offer that as a package, and then in the not too distant future we will probably break that out separately. So for those of you who have the WinDev training, you could upgrade just to the WebDev. Or those of you who are wanting the WebDev training, I still recommend you purchase the WinDev, one, because you get the manual. But when I teach my classes, I teach the core concepts of the W language. And so I picked WinDev for that, because so much of the WinDev language is applicable to WebDev and also WinDev Mobile. So if you get a good handle on WinDev, you'll have a good handle on WebDev, notwithstanding the differences that there are for the web. But we go through some of those in here, how browser code is split out from server code. That's the big difference. But that's the reason I say start with WinDev, because then you don't have to be concerned with having your server up and going or the environment working quite the way you need it for WebDev. You can learn in WinDev and then move to web.
Cool. Any questions? Otherwise, Glenn, I think you have to go check your knee out.
I do. Yes, I do. So thanks for the time for me presenting that.
That's exciting. I can't wait.
I can't either. It's looking good.
All right. I'm stopping the recording then.